All right. Well, my name's Ned. I'm from Crying Out here with
Edgar.
and we're talking about a testimony of something that happened just a few days ago. A bunch of us were at the lunch at a Chinese restaurant here locally in town, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move on us for our waiter. And it turned out that he was co-owner of the restaurant with his wife, and the Lord began to give us very specific words over him and his family.
And you know what happened was we were just actually eating, enjoying our time together and everything. We had just gotten out of an incredible service at church where all these people just went up and testified and everything. So we were all filled with faith and just expecting for God to do something. And what happened was, out of nowhere, we just started talking, and we asked him if he was married and everything, and he's like, yes, I am. And then he's like, my wife actually works here. So I was like, well, why don't you call her and we'll pray for you and her also. And one of the things we found out was that actually they're both Christians, Spirit-filled believers, and owners of the place. And so we start praying for them, and as we're praying for them, God starts moving in their hearts and everything. And also, there was an employee actually that walked by, and this was really awesome.
This is probably the coolest part of
Yeah.
the whole deal. One of their employees was just kind of standing in the back watching what was going on, and we asked if we could pray for her. So the owners, of course, say yes. And she comes just scurrying forward, very excited. And she says, as soon as you guys began to pray, my baby, she was pregnant, said my baby began kicking like crazy. And the Lord just began to do a deliverance on her from oppression, wounds of the past. It was really awesome. You were praying for her, and it was just crazy to see the power of God manifest in the middle of this restaurant the way it did.
And you know, the thing is that it's amazing when God's presence is so strong in any place that you're in.
Right.
And it's like there's this person there just watching us pray for their employers, and then the baby starts kicking because of God's presence.
Yes.
And if that's not a sign to somebody of God's presence and God's power, I don't know what is, especially for a mother that is expecting a baby to come forth soon. And one of the things that God started speaking to me as we were actually praying for her was that she had been struggling with some oppressions and depression in her life.
Yeah.
And as we started praying for her, I said to her, you know, I just feel like you want to cry. And I said to her, it's okay, because you need to let go of all the grief and all the things that have hindered you from actually living in that place of joy that God has for you. And this is just as a testimony of how God works when we're out there, and how God can work in your life also when you go out there and minister. You know, you just got to be bold. You got to be expecting God to use you. You got to be ready at any moment. And whenever anything God says to you, don't reason it, don't think about it, just go for it, and God will back you up. You know, we've had many times, Ned, where we're out there and we just get rejected and everything. And you know, that happened recently as we were out on Walmart, and we went to these two different guys, or three actually, and each one of them kept saying no, 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 no. But we didn't give up. We actually, by the time it was all over, we actually encountered this other lady that needed help, and Ned was chasing after her, and as we were going along, we got stopped and everything, but she actually went to a different place where we couldn't reach her because she worked there. But then suddenly, because we stopped for this other two guys, she came back, and we actually were able to minister to her, and God just did something incredible in her life that night also.
It was really awesome because, like Edgar was explaining, we went through three pretty decent rejections.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, God in His Word already made provision for rejection. He said when He set up the disciples 2 by 2, He said, listen, if people reject you, they won't take the word that you're delivering, just shake the dust off of your feet. So God's saying, don't even carry the residue of rejection upon you. So what happened for us is we decided, you know what, we're going to press forward and press on. God's got a word for this woman. And the Lord spoke so specifically through us to her that her comment was, oh my God, it's like you guys were in the car with me just a few hours ago when I was talking to my mother and my sister about these situations in my life. Then God began to give us specific words of knowledge for things that were going on in her body, gave us specific words of knowledge for her son who was battling with some behavioral and psychological issues. So without a doubt, that woman left knowing that God thinks about her and loves her.
Yeah, and she later actually texted you a message saying that she hasn't been able to stop talking about what happened that night, and that's because when someone receives from God, what they want to do is, number one, worship Him. And number two, they want to make known to everybody else what has
Amen.
happened in their lives. And you know, it's like the biblical times when Jesus was walking on the earth, and He would tell people, well, don't say anything, but people will go and say anything anyways because they couldn't help themselves.
Can't hold it in.
You know,
Yeah.
and that is the powerful thing about evangelism when you do it in a supernatural way. And I have to be honest with you, it wasn't like that all the time for us. And it
That's
wasn't
right.
for me for sure. And I had to press in and believe God for God to just give me a hunger for the supernatural. And I'll be honest with you, as you're watching this, it has really been probably a week since we really started moving in a new dimension of the supernatural. Because I want you to realize and I want you to see that no matter what is happening in your life, there's a moment when God releases the supernatural power. And when you begin to move in it, don't stop. Continue to persist. Continue to persevere. And God's going to use you in a mighty way. There's a before and then there's an after. Before, we evangelize with power and authority also, but God is now moving in the supernatural through bringing healings, sharp words of knowledge that are going to set people free, signs and wonders like this lady whose kid just was kicking in her belly. And the gentleman actually, and I forgot to say this at the beginning, was that he came afterwards and he said to me, he said, you know, when you were praying for me, I just felt this thing coming up from my stomach, and I was actually praying for the river of God to be released in his life and for the fire of God to come on his life. And he said, he's like, look, I have goosebumps. And he said
Yeah.
to me, he's like, I like this feeling. And you see, that is a tangible encounter with the presence of God. And I'll be honest with you, at that moment, I was just feeling God's presence, and just being close and connected to Him helped be able to release that also. But again, it was that risk and just being available and being willing to do whatever it takes to actually release the power of God.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's just super exciting to be able to step out in boldness and step out in faith. And what we're doing here, this is not to say how cool we are or how awesome we are. Listen, we are saved by grace. We're here by grace. And you know what? In the natural, we're probably the guys that should have never made it. But it pleased God to confound the wise of this world with the foolish things of it. And that's what we are. We're just, you know, God took a foolish thing and He made something great out of it. And so my challenge is to you is to get your theology off the blackboard. Get it off the paper and begin to live it. There's a saying in football. You know, I used to play some ball, so I use football analogies a lot. But they talk about someone being a workout Tarzan and a gridiron Jane. That means that when you're working out and you're in a protected environment, you're just amazing. You look like an animal. You're just awesome. But when you hit the actual battlefield, you turn to jello. And the thing is that I'm challenging people right now who've been workout Tarzans. You've been in the church and you've ministered powerfully, and I don't come against any of that. Don't take this the wrong way. But what I'm saying is, have you taken that out to the streets? Are you dependent upon the atmosphere, or do you have the raw faith, raw power, and raw authority of Jesus Christ to go into the unfriendly places, to go into the places where there isn't praise and worship going on, to where all there is with you is just the presence of God inside of you? And you know what? That's the thing, because the world has been invading the church, but it's time for the church to be the church and to go out and invade the world. And I guarantee you, if you do that, they'll say the same things about you that they said about the Apostle Paul. Who are these that turn the world upside down? Well, we just bless you. Thank you for tuning in. Love you guys. Hook up with us. Our information will be at the bottom of this. If you want to contact us, we're more than happy to connect with you in faith and be a blessing to you and to see the kingdom of God manifested by all means possible on this earth. Take care.